Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Hyperion Hub, your meeting place for all things Disney. Now your hosts.
Hello and welcome to the Hyperion Hub. I'm John Alois and I'm joined by Sean Degenhart.
Hello, John.
And John Redlingschafer.
Hello there.
We're going to start the show off like we usually do with our Disney views. And this week, I'm talking about Emmy nominations, 145 to be exact, for the Disney company. And we're going to focus in on Disney Plus, who had 19 Emmy nominations for a brand new streaming service. That's amazing.
Crazy.
It is. 15 in particular for The Mandalorian alone. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have done a fantastic job. And I know, Sean, you've seen all the episodes. John,
Yes.
not the biggest Star Wars fan. Maybe this is the show to bring you on board. What do you think?
I'll try. I don't know, but bless your hearts. I'll try.
Some other ones on there, of course, we had The Imagineering Story, which has a nomination. The World According to Jeff Goldblum. Some of these things we've talked about in the past. So,
Yeah, Porky asks a question.
Yep, that was another one. I'm excited about that. Here's a little trivia for you. The first Emmy ceremony was in 1949, and in his career, Walt Disney was nominated 4 times and won for one series. Can you guess what it is?
How much
we
money
don't
do
have
get?
we don't have the rights to Jeopardy, so the theme song I would sing that right now. But I'll tell you, it was for his Disneyland series, and he got it for Best Producer in a Film Series in 1956, and well earned, obviously. Guys, I'm so giddy about our guest tonight. Co-host of the Mousetalgia podcast, co-host of the Doombuggies Spook Show, host of the Storied podcast, all about the Haunted Mansion, creator of Doombuggies.com, and author of the unauthorized story of Walt Disney's Haunted Mansion. Please welcome to the Hyperion Hub, Jeff Baham.
Well, thank you. It is an honor to be here on your show. I appreciate your bringing me on.
Oh, absolutely. And before I keep going, I just want to ask you, is it Baham or Bam?
Wow, that is such a great intricate question. I mean, it's actually, I say Baham all the time just because it's the closest, easiest way to communicate to my students, to people everywhere. It's actually Bam. It's kind of Welsh, I think, like Cheltenham, Bam.
Perfect. You are involved in the world of Disney fandom and all these different things. You're an avid collector. You're a historian. Where did this fascination begin? You're from California. Did it start growing up, and how did it become what it is today?
A couple things came together. It was kind of a conglomeration of things. One was that my parents grew up in Los Angeles, South Central area, and they met and they had friends there. So when they would take my sister and I down to visit their friends in LA, often it would include a Disneyland trip. So that was through the 70s, mid to late 70s. We would go as a family, or my sister and I and their friends' children. They would dump us, the 4 of us, at Disneyland, and then they would go to Knott's for chicken dinner, right? So that's part of it, right? Grew up with not all the time Disneyland. I wasn't like a local, but like annual Disneyland. It was a destination, right? Part of it is that I've always been a collector, and a collector in the sense of kind of popular culture and marketing, even before I knew it. When I was a little kid, I loved Star Wars cards, of course, Star Wars, but I would make my own packages and draw, I just loved packaging and creating things. When Pet Rocks came out, I begged my mom, like, you gotta buy me a Pet Rock. Somehow that just like spoke to me. So I'd always like that kind of thing, like commercial collectible type stuff, even when I was a little kid, right? So Disneyana kind of fit right into that as I grew up and started to appreciate art. I was always an artist. I had that. See, my parents didn't really listen to pop music, but they did listen to, they bought us all the Disneyland records, the 12-inch records, right, with the books. And so my parents also were youth leaders and had this youth group, and they always had a copy of the Haunted House record that Disneyland did, because they would have a haunted house every Halloween at their church.
So
right?
the special effects album?
Yeah,
Okay.
the special effects record. So I grew up with that and with the Haunted Mansion record. I loved that record to death. I traced the pictures all the time, would break the records. By the time I kind of realized what was going on, like I would say high school, I was going through our old records and we had like 3 of those records, but only one album, and my mom said, well, you kept breaking them, tracing the pictures in the records. So I guess kind of putting all that stuff together. I can't say it was not really the animation. I love Disney animation, don't get me wrong, but that's not really what pulled me in. I wasn't a big, those movies changed my life. It was more about the Disneyland and kind of recognizing the commercial nature, but the influence on culture, even though I didn't quite realize how to put that into words, it was kind of that angle that tugged at me personally. Because I went to school to be a designer, graphic designer, and art was always I was always the kid at school that people would want to draw me a picture, that kind of thing. So, and I loved monsters. I was a monster. Oh, that's the other thing. Big monster kid. Like all I would spend my allowance on was famous monster magazines and monster comic books. And they were mostly Universal monsters, but Hammer, all that kind of stuff. The good 60s monster, atomic age, scary, but not gross type of thing. That really was my thing, like Godzilla and the Creature from the Black Lagoon and all the Universal monsters and the Mummy and all that stuff. That was and Halloween, right? Just buying all this makeup and costumes and going into the drugstore at Halloween, and it was like better than Christmas because I could use my allowance to buy vampire blood tubes and vampire teeth and all this great stuff, right? So that whole picture, that's kind of my childhood, right? And so it kind of first landed on the Haunted Mansion, which dragged me into Disney and Imagineering as a bigger thing to study and learn about. That's kind of the twisted path that brought me to kind of where I am at right now.
Haunted Mansion has such a rich history too, so I'm sure once you dove in, it was hard to figure out where to stop for
hard
you.
To back out. Yeah. It is. That's true, because really the whole story of Disneyland has some part. It all fits into what happened with the Haunted Mansion, and then when Walt Disney died, the Haunted Mansion launches where Imagineering went from that point. So it's kind of a hub, to use an important word, of how everything worked with Imagineering, in my opinion. So that was another big part of the puzzle.
I'm such a big fan of Mousetalgia. I've been listening for over a decade now, and you guys gel so well, but with very different personalities. There's Kristen Pfeiffer, Becky, and Dave Braylon, and of course yourself. How did Mousetalgia come to be?
So I thought of the name, or I believed I thought up the word Mousetalgia. I later found it on a newspaper search in some New York Times article in the 70s, I think, talking about a Mickey Mouse collector, and he just used in his headline Mousetalgia. So I thought, darn it, I wasn't the first. But I thought it was clever. I think I was trying to come up with a blog. Blogs were kind of a big deal in, I don't know, around 2005, right around there. And I wanted to do one of these Disney blogs. I kind of wanted to be a kind of a hoity-toity armchair historian. There's that world on the internet of Disney kind of historians, a little bit bitter, a little bit negative, but really deep dive into Disney history. I thought I could be that
bitter
one.
And negative because they don't want things to change, that type of.
I would say so,
Okay.
And that was me being editorializing. I don't want to become fake news here, but it's not really, I mean, I'm sure they feel like they are holding people to account with their opinions. They are, that kind of thing, but it's kind of gone more towards the Twitter world, the Disney Twitter these days. I would say that morphed into Disney Twitter. But at the time I thought it was really, I mean, it is, there's some amazing research in this Disney blog historian world that I wanted to become a part of. At the same time, on Doombuggies, we were having a pretty substantial message board. In the early 2000s, social media wasn't really a thing. There was MySpace, but and so message boards were a big deal. We had thousands of people. Disney came to us with the Haunted Mansion movie to kind of do some, grassroots promotion, and it really took. I mean, our audience just grew and grew and grew, right? So I saw people leave, like Ricky left from Doombuggies, or didn't leave, but he went on to start Inside the Magic. And Lou had written me a little bit, and he was like, hey, I'm putting this book together. Can you help me with my website? And I said, well, it's not really my thing. Then he went and became WDW Radio, right? So I saw people in Doombuggies kind of finding their niche and following it. And I thought, you know what, Doombuggies, while it became a big thing, that was never really my goal to have a community. I wasn't really good at that. And I had a lot of moderators and it caused lots of problems because all communities with moderators have problems. It just happens, right? So, and I wanted more to be a creator, right? So I started Mousetalgia thinking I would have a blog called Mousetalgia. It sounds like one of those heavy Disney history blogs, right? And then I kind of started kicking it around. Meanwhile, Kristen and I were good friends, and she and one of our friends named Beth were getting together, and we were thinking, well, I have these other friends that started all these podcasts. That sounds like something that's kind of up and coming. Maybe we could do that. And Kirsten and I kicked it around. We came up with some ideas. We literally went to a restaurant and took some napkins and wrote down some ideas.
Wow.
And, didn't quite gel, right? We didn't quite figure out what we wanted it to be. I wasn't sure I wanted to change Mousetalgia to that yet because I still was starting to come up with an idea for the blog and everything. So anyway, it kind of, for a year, it festered a little bit. And then I met Dave and Becky. I mean, basically, Becky and my wife worked together. We became friends. We were going to the Maker Fair once, and I was talking to Dave and just telling him, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. He's like, yeah, that's cool. I have this recording stuff. You know, if you want me to help you engineer it, I could do that. And then he casually mentioned that he had done some radio hosting in college. And I said, well, you know, it's going to need a host. Maybe you could host it. And that's literally how Mousetalgia started. Dave and I just agreed to let's try this. And Kristen, we brought on board because she and I had already kind of planned to do it. I mean, and the good fortune here, I mean, Dave and I we didn't really know each other that well when we started it. So we are good friends now, and we started in a friendly relationship, but it is a little, I mean, here's a little behind the scenes stuff. We did kind of know that people want to hear friendly banter. So we did make friendly banter on a show. You know, I mean, we didn't all start out as best Disney friends, although they had come to one of my Doombuggies events. So we all had I guess you could say we had a mutual respect for each other and what we brought to the table. But we've become friends since. Kristen and I were good friends already. So.
And still learning about what you guys each bring to the table too, your strengths and what your interests are. Yeah, absolutely.
We did know kind of from the early start that I would be the history guy, Kristen would be the funny person, Dave would be the host, and Becky would be the resort specialist. We kind of knew that. So we did know we had these pieces that would work as a whole. We didn't know quite how it would fit. We didn't know Becky would actually become a travel agent. You know, there's a lot of things that kind of worked well that we weren't positive about, but we kind of knew Becky's going to talk about the new pools. I'm going to talk about like the collectible merchandise, and somewhere in the middle there, Dave and Kristen will fill it up. That's kind of how it started.
Yeah, great plan. Love the show.
Thanks.
So what were some of the biggest struggles you had starting up as you guys were getting to know each other and just figuring everything out?
The biggest struggles were probably mental gymnastics. Like, are we going to do this? Are we not going to do this? So anyone can start a podcast. And anyone can do it well for 5 or 6 weeks. And then it starts to become, this is this much, X amount of work, right? And it depends how you set up your podcast. Like if you don't have X amount of time, you can set it up to just be, we're just going to record and put that on the air. And that's our podcast, right? But we kind of knew we wanted it to be a little bit more polished than that. So by, I don't know, 6 or a couple months in, we kind of realize, okay, this is this much work. So then it's for all of us to decide, do we really want to do that much work every week, right? And because at the time we were only doing it every 2 weeks, and it still was a little bit starting to become a reel, right? And so I guess it's fortunate in a way, and also difficult in a way. The four of us, I mean, part of the reason we've never missed a week in 12 years is not one of us wants to be the one that's responsible for it not to be that week. You know, we're very tenacious about this show, especially now. Like, who's going to be the one that says we don't go 12 years in 1 week? Right. So, and I'm sure it will happen for some important reason. We will eventually miss a show, right? But we haven't yet, just because we're tenacious about it. But I would say the biggest struggle was really getting to that point of saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's like job number 2. You have your job that pays you, and then you have your job that pays in different ways. And we hadn't even yet figured that out for sure. We kind of guesstimated lose audience, and we thought, this is all Walt Disney World. There's really not a lot of Disneyland stuff. We maybe can, find some audience similar. And we didn't find a similar audience. We still haven't to Lou. Like he's, And so for a while there, we were thinking, what is the trajectory supposed to look like here? It's whatever's in your head, right? So, but we, had to also wrestle with that. Like, is it worth doing if we're going to plateau? And, how long do we live with the plateau? And do we know enough to get past that and to grow the show? Do we have enough answers to do this kind of stuff? We really didn't know a lot of that stuff. And also just feedback, small feedback. Like at the time when we get one email from someone that said, this is amazing, we would think, all right, we're going to do it next week.
I know you didn't set out trying to build a community, but you certainly have. And you've created events. And I was telling these guys before the show, can you talk about that Tahitian Terrace recreation? That's amazing to me that you were able to work with Disney and Disneyland and pull that off. Can you tell us what that is, first of all?
Yeah, absolutely. So when was that? 2000 and I don't remember. Sometime.
Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but
yeah, but I don't know, 7 years ago, we decided that we wanted to do an event at Disneyland we started the show because I had hosted a party at Disneyland for Doombuggies' 10th anniversary. And I did that largely on the backs of people that knew how to do it, that worked for Doombuggies in that social community that I didn't really know how to manage very well. I had good people working there for me, which was fortunate, right? And they helped me figure out, how are we going to host this event to celebrate 10 years of Doombuggies? So we rented the Blue Bayou, we rented the Haunted Mansion for an hour, we rented the Hitchhiking Ghosts in front of it, which were by far the most expensive part of the whole shebang. Disney knows what its characters are worth. and we charged basically what we could, but we charged enough to pay for it. I think it was $150 or $200 or something like that. And we paid for it with that. I think we got some deals because we had someone that was a Club 33 member that knew some of the people that worked at Disneyland that could make the point of, this isn't a wedding. It's not a corporation. It is a avid group of fans that just really want to support themselves. We're going to have all these Disney legends there. Can you work with us? And they did. Disneyland worked with us. Of course, it was also, I guess, 11 years ago. So things were a lot different at Disneyland 11 years ago than they are now. It was just starting to become kind of what we know of as Disneyland now with the pass holders and everything. But it was great. I mean, we had Existencio there and Bob Gurr. Neil Patrick Harris came just to hang out. It was a pretty fun party, right? So I did that. And it was reasonable. Like, you could do it. I had, like I said, the good fortune of someone that kind of knew some people at Disneyland that could make a good case for why this was a valuable thing for us to do. And we did it, right? And so I knew that could be done. So that's why when Mousetalgia was rolling, our sponsor, Becky at MEI Mouse Fan Travel, she said, you guys should start to host things for your listeners because that's how you can start to build community. And she kind of knew how to host these things at Walt Disney World because she did it a lot with Lou and WDW Radio. But she wanted to get kind of into the Disneyland world. And so she was kind of new at Disneyland, right? So it was another tenacious thing. She wanted to make a splash. And I just said, you know what? Well, the place is there. We can. And what I had originally thought was we'll bring in one dancer to do some Tahitian dances. We'll have a kind of a buffet reminiscent, and we'll have someone come speak like Rolly Crump. I had hoped to get Rolly Crump because we had spoken with him before. He's not a friend or anything, but I had a good relationship with him, and not professionally, but mutual respect. So I thought maybe he will come do this. And then it turned out, I think Disneyland itself kind of was the key here. They really wouldn't let us do anything like that unless it fit into a mold. And you know what? Still to this day, I don't think all the approvals were made. They kind of kept giving us deadlines, and there was a multitude of approvals and things that had to be agreed on by different places at Disneyland. And they would eventually get like a tentative okay. Then we would just move forward because like we used the logo. I mean, Disneyland put this program together for us. That's what Disneyland did. They said, you can still do what you want with the history of it. We can host it here. You can have whatever kind of meal you want, but the program we have to, like, it's entertainment in Disneyland. We have to do that ourselves. And so I wasn't going to complain about that. I knew there was no possible way we could afford that. But our sponsor, Becky at Mouse Fan Travel, said, well, let me deal with them. You guys put the show together.
I met Becky at an event in Indianapolis, and I could see her just making things happen.
Yeah, she worked with rock bands in her previous life before opening her own travel agency. So she kind of has that marketing entertainment background, right? So she kind of had that part of it. Plus now she's in charge of this major, huge travel agency. So she wanted to do something really super special. So she worked with Disneyland to recreate the show. We worked on getting Rolly Crump to come speak about because he worked on the Tiki Room, and he sculpted the tikis basically for both the terrace and the Tiki Room and Polynesian Resort over at Disney World. And then a couple of our Imagineer friends were like, "Oh, we got to come," and they invited. So it turned into this thing, right? They invited Tony Baxter, and Bob Gurr heard about it. He had to come. So it turned out that Disneyland hired the son of the original fire knife dancer from the original Tahitian Terrace dinner show. And he had since then started his own Polynesian dance troupe. So they came and did a replica show. Everything was exactly the same because he remembered it from his father, except for he couldn't do a fire knife dance. It's some regulations, right? So he had to just use knives, right? Swords. But otherwise, it was exactly the same. We had this amazing buffet. We even had the grog punch that they used to serve, the Tahitian Terrace punch. It was the most amazing night. We'll never do anything like that at Disneyland again. Nothing will ever happen like that. It's out of the range of podcasts. We got fortunate, and Becky, to this day, I don't know I don't know if I should even say this. I don't know what it cost. We didn't pay. We didn't pay
what you think
we
would have.
We charged people as much as we could,
right?
And think they'll come and not just say this is the most ridiculous thing. I think we charged them $300 or something.
Yeah,
but it
was saying that
it was kind of a token fee, to be honest. I mean, Becky just poured her. She's trying to make herself or get herself involved with Disneyland in a good, strong way. And I think she really did that. And Disneyland loved it. We had people from Disneyland just kind of checking out what's going on through the whole process. They all wanted to know, what are they doing and how is it going to work? And you notice D23 hosted a couple very similar events the next following year. I'm sure they had been inspired by what we did.
Well, it's interesting how sometimes they don't realize how big of an audience they have for certain aspects until they see a show like Mousetalgia pull something like that in because of the community that you guys have created.
And it was similar, even though it was prohibitively expensive, it was still, even in that amount, it was still largely a similar situation to the Doombuggies thing in that we had advocates in Disneyland that just wanted to see this happen. That's why it kind of happened, right? You can't just go there and say, oh, I want to recreate Adventure Through Inner Space. There's this room, let's just do it. They're pretty protective of their properties. And I think we just got really fortunate that Becky advocated for, no, these people are serious. It's going to be the Tahitian Terrace and we're going to respect it and admire it. And I think enough people in Disneyland inside the green, shiny building were like, okay, well, I really want to see what we can do and what could happen here. You don't see these things very often because Disneyland's not really set up to do it. They're more set up for corporations to rent a big space and have wine and hors d'oeuvres out on the street, or weddings, or some prince that has millions of dollars that can just rent Fantasyland and do whatever he wants. You know what I mean? They're set up for that, but not really for these little kind of, how much does it cost?
Fan events,
Yeah, fan events, right? But it worked out for us in this instance.
I kind of want to go big picture because I hear teacher, art, podcaster, graphic design. I know you don't have a typical week, but what do you find, maybe a mantra or a one-liner that keeps you motivated and balancing all those things in the air?
Oh, boy, this is going to sound trite, but in the words of Marty Sklar, if you can dream it, you can do it, maybe. I don't actually know that I have that specific of a thing keeping me going. It's probably more of a vision of, that's a really good question, actually. Teaching is late in life. I've come to teaching. This is my 6th year as an educator. I teach photography and graphic design at the high school and the conservatory. And so, in my 6th year, I finally feel like I'm a teacher now. But I still, I don't know, all those things you listed that I try to do, I don't know what teachers I think believe like, well, teaching is that one thing. And I feel a little guilty, like I should feel that way, but I get tugged in the historian, like, let's learn about things way. I really want to just learn about things and then put it out there to tell everyone. And that's a tug on me in addition to educating kids. I love kids. The kids I teach, the high schoolers, are amazing. And graphic design has always been something I've loved since I was a kid. You know, like I said, I was making those Star Wars card packages when I was 9 years old, right? So things pull me into different directions. It's very confusing for myself too. So I'm glad you've dragged this all up now that I can lay in bed tonight all night long worrying about it.
Well, everybody's going to love joining us now, right?
Well,
No,
you know,
but
it's sometimes it's good to be reflective and find out what that branding is that you have. I mean, what keeps you going? And now you're a teacher. I mean, you're passing along that experience. And I think we're all dads on this show here, and yourself, and that's probably the ultimate goal, right? And so that leads me to your book, The Unauthorized Story of Walt Disney's Haunted Mansion. You wanted to take this topic and share everything you know about it. And it's a fantastic start to finish book. Was it difficult working knowing that it would be the unauthorized version? How were you able to break down some barriers and get all the information you wanted to get?
Putting the book together was also another defined moment where I said, I'm going to be an author and write a book. It was more, I realized I wanted to do conventions because I knew all this great stuff that people wanted to hear about. So I wanted to talk about it. Even though I'm a very shy person, that was a weird recognition in myself. Like, but I want to try this. And I kind of knew I could make a little money just selling like a little chapbook or something to go along with my booth at a convention, right? So I had written some magazine articles and things about the Haunted Mansion, done a lot of interviews with newspapers and things, and I just had all that little bits of stuff, and I thought, well, this could be a book, because also simultaneously, the Disney niche publishing was becoming a bigger deal. Like, that was a big part of it. Like, I recognized now there's a marketplace for this. People are writing their Disney history books. Armchair historians are putting what they know together, and there are publishers that are printing this stuff. Everyone started to not be scared of Disney, basically. That was part of it too. I realized, this is not going to, someone will publish this book easily. So I wrote it, 50,000 words. I started with probably 10,000 words of magazine articles and stuff I had written for Doombuggies. And then I went to talk to Rolly Crump for a day or a few hours, I don't know, an afternoon, and kind of formed like a little nucleus that I could tell the story of the Imagineers around that interview. And so I used that as kind of a leap off point for some of the history. Also Jason Sorrell, who wrote the Disney book, he is a friend, and he had hung around Doombuggies quite a bit while he was writing the Disney official Haunted Mansion book. So we kind of knew, and he'd kind of talked to us a little bit. We kind of knew what he was trying to do, and he wished he could have written a long book about the Haunted Mansion, but he realized Disney wanted a picture book, of course, which makes sense. Of course, that's going to sell way more copies than a history book, a picture book. So he had to kind of condense a lot of information so he could fit all the pictures in there. And so I also knew that, well, this will work great because I can just tell people, go buy his book and you'll see all the pictures, then buy my book and you'll get all the information about how it all came to be. A friend of mine works in Hollywood and works with Guillermo del Toro, and I had written, Guillermo del Toro will on occasion answer my emails. That's as far as I'll take that. Like, if you're not friends, he will respond to me as the Doombuggies guy. He's was a big fan of Doombuggies, the site and the community, right? And so, and I had a friend that worked with him that greased the wheels a little bit and said, hey, my buddy works for Doombuggies. You know that website. Hey, he just wrote a book. Will you read it? And he was like, I'll write the introduction. So I was like, that's so awesome. But then, when I finished, he was just going into production with a movie. It was like, there's no way, right? And so he said, send me your book. And so I sent it to him. And literally, okay, I'm going to give you some more secret information here. Like, don't tell anyone, except for your listeners, right? So he sent it back within 12 hours. And he had sent back this amazing blurb for the cover, a cover blurb. And I am going to be grateful forever to Guillermo del Toro for writing that. I believe it's accurate. Do I think he read the whole entire... I mean, in theory, you can read my whole book in about 5 hours if you sit there and read it. Do I think he sat there in the 12 hours and found time to read my whole book? I'm going to let you just make your own decision about that. But I think he read enough of it to know, like, oh, this is the book that, Haunted Mansion fans wanted. Like, it's something that tells you all the stories and all the secrets. And since then, I've had 2 revisions, and I keep learning everyone about the Haunted Mansion. Just keeps pouring information into the world. I have a whole bunch more information now, so I'll probably write another revision for next year. We keep revising it. It gets a little bit longer and a little bit longer, but the Disney Archives, someone saw a couple copies sitting on the shelf in there when they went recently, so I know it finally made it there. But I mean, that doesn't mean a lot other than there's a book published about Disney, so we better keep track of it, is all that really means. But still, I'll take it as a win.
One last question for you. What is your favorite Disney moment?
Oh, man. The one thing I will say I am so grateful to Mousetalgia for is so many great Disney moments we've been able to have. It's really hard to choose one. I mean, I made friends with Jody daily through Doombuggies. And I mean, friends, it's more professional acquaintances. And, I never know how to call internet friends. Like, are you friends? Are we acquaintances? What are we? Like, we don't go have beers every weekend, but they invited me out for beers once, so I guess we're friends, right? So Kevin and Jody are kind of friends, right? And they were hosting a party for Richard Sherman's 85th birthday. I guess it was a couple years ago, right? And so they invited me to come to their house for Richard Sherman's birthday party. And that was pretty amazing. I said, are you sure? Did you mean this email to come to me? Yeah. I mean, we had the good
Jeff
fortune
Baham
of having...
or Jeff Bayham? Which one
exactly.
did you want?
Is it Baham you meant? Right. And so that was amazing. Like, I went and there was, some Disney luminaries there. I mean, Richard Sherman probably had a few birthday parties, but he was there and we sang. He played the piano in their parlor and we sang Richard Sherman songs.
Wow.
He had a cake, like a little golden record design, and it was just amazing evening. That's probably, if I had to pick one, that's what came to mind. So It was an amazing Disney moment.
Yeah.
I don't think you can top that. Maybe someday you're saying I was on the Hyperion Hub.
Maybe.
Jeff, thank you so much. We're so happy to sit down and talk with you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Anytime.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'd love to hear from you. If you have a story to share with us, you can email us at podcast@thehyperionhub.com. Wherever you listen to our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have a great week, everybody.
We're glad you could join us. We'd love to hear from you. You can email or send us a recorded audio message at podcast@thehyperionhub.com. Find us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The Hyperion Hub is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company or its subsidiaries. We'll meet you next time at the Hyperion Hub.